Okay, wow. These articles you sent over about anger management from President Online by this Japanese psychologist are really fascinating. Like this whole idea of passive aggressive anger
Uh-huh.
really got my attention. It's not like,
Yeah. Right.
the typical shouting and arguing, but as this author pointed out, it can be just as damaging, if not more so,
Oh, yeah.
to relationships. Have you ever, I mean,
Oh, for sure.
I'm sure you've encountered this kind of anger, right?
Definitely. I mean, it's probably way more common and we realize it's like this,
Yeah.
kind of sneaky like sabotage
Uh-huh.
that just kind of festers under the surface. And,
Yeah.
the author actually connects it to our human need for attention.
Oh,
You
interesting.
know, sometimes when we don't get that positive attention we crave, we might like unconsciously seek out negative attention,
Right.
even if it ends up hurting us in the long run.
It's like, hey, pay attention to me, even if it's for all the wrong reasons.
Exactly.
That's such an interesting psychological insight.
It is. Yeah, I think what's really
Yeah.
intriguing is the author's suggestion to keep an anger diary. And again, it's not about
Okay.
like dwelling on the negative. It's more about just like noticing our patterns of behavior.
Okay, so how does this anger diary work? Is it just like venting on a paper?
No, it's a little more structured than that. You start with a date,
Okay.
of course. Then you write down like the event, what actually triggered your anger.
Mm-hmm.
But then it gets interesting because then you go into your interpretation of that situation.
Oh, okay.
Like what were the thoughts that were going through your head? Was there like a belief or an assumption that you had that fueled that anger? And then finally you reflect on your actions.
Right.
How did you actually react? How did you respond?
So it's like holding up a mirror to your anger.
Yes.
You're seeing the trigger, the interpretation, and then the consequence all laid out in front of you.
Exactly. And by documenting these patterns, you start to gain a much clearer understanding of, okay, what are my anger triggers and how do I typically respond?
Yeah.
And then from there, you can actually start to explore healthier ways of managing those situations.
So it's less about avoiding anger altogether and more about understanding how to work with it in a
Totally.
more constructive way, right?
Yeah, precisely. It's about recognizing that anger is a natural human emotion.
Right.
It's what we do with that energy that determines whether it's destructive or transformative.
Absolutely. But there's another point in these articles that really stuck with me, and it was this idea that holding on to resentment is like giving someone free rent in your head.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a, I mean,
Powerful.
it's such a powerful analogy.
It really is. Yeah.
Oh,
It highlights the mental and emotional burden
uh-huh.
that resentment carries. You think about it, resentment consumes valuable mental bandwidth that you could be using for creativity, problem solving, or simply just enjoying life.
Yeah.
And there's even scientific evidence to support this.
Wow.
Studies have shown that
Oh,
forgiveness
wow.
is linked to reduced stress, lower blood pressure, and even improve immune function. So it's not just about being nice, it's about taking care of your well-being.
You're carrying around this heavy baggage that's weighing you down, but
Yes.
you have the power to just put it down, to free yourself from that burden.
Yes, you do.
And that's where this reach method comes in that
Exactly.
the author talks about.
Uh-huh. Exactly. This is a 5-step process developed by American psychologist Everett Worthington, and it's designed to help us forgive and let go of resentment.
Awesome. Okay, so let's break down these steps, starting with R. What does R stand for?
R stands for recall,
Okay.
and this is where you take the time to objectively recall the event that caused you pain.
Uh-huh.
Write it down, focusing on the facts, but without blaming yourself or the other person.
So it's like creating a neutral record of what happened without getting lost in the emotional storm.
Exactly. It's about separating the event itself from your interpretation of it.
Okay.
And once you've recalled the event, you move on to E, which stands for emphasize.
Okay, so this is where empathy comes in, right?
Precisely. The challenge here is to step into the other person's shoes and try to understand why they might have acted the way they did.
Okay.
Now, this doesn't mean condoning their behavior,
Right.
but it's about trying to see things from their perspective,
Yeah.
even if you don't agree with it.
This step seems like it could be really difficult, especially if you've been deeply hurt.
Yes,
But I can see how it would be so crucial for moving towards forgiveness.
it's not easy, but it's a powerful way to shift your perspective. Instead of seeing the other person as a villain, you start to see them as a human being,
Right.
flawed and complex,
Yeah.
just like you.
Uh-huh.
And that brings us to the third step, A, which stands for altruistic gift.
All right, I'm curious about this one.
Yeah.
What is an altruistic gift in the context of forgiveness?
So think back to a time when you hurt someone and were forgiven. Do you remember that sense of relief, that weight lifted off your shoulder?
It's like a huge wave of gratitude washing over you.
Exactly. This step is about recognizing that forgiveness is a gift, not just to the receiver, but also to the giver.
Okay.
It's about understanding that we all make mistakes and we all deserve a chance at redemption.
So even though it might feel like you're letting the other person off the hook,
Yeah,
you're actually doing yourself a favor by letting go of that resentment.
you are. It's a win-win.
Okay.
And that brings us to the fourth step, C, which stands for commit.
Okay, so this is where the rubber meets the road. What
Yes.
does it mean to commit to forgiveness?
It's about making a conscious decision to release the anger and resentment.
Okay.
It's about choosing peace over bitterness, healing over hurt.
Like signing a peace treaty with yourself.
I like that. I like that analogy.
Yeah.
And finally, we come to H, which stands for hold.
So that sounds like the ongoing work of forgiveness.
It is. It is. Resentment can be sneaky. It
Right.
can try to creep back in, especially when you're stressed or triggered.
Oh, yeah.
So this step is about being vigilant, about reminding yourself of the choice you've made to forgive.
It's like building a muscle.
Yes,
The more you practice forgiveness, the stronger you become.
exactly. And over time, forgiveness becomes less of a conscious effort and more of a natural way of being. It's about choosing to live in the present moment, free from the chains of the past.
It's so powerful, this reach method.
Uh-huh.
It's a really structured approach to something that can feel really emotional and messy.
Yeah,
Do you find that it helps people to have this kind of framework to work with?
absolutely. Having a step-by-step process can make forgiveness feel less daunting, especially for those who are struggling with, really deep-seated resentment.
Right.
It provides a roadmap, a sense of direction.
Mm-hmm.
And what's even more remarkable is that this isn't just some, you know, feel-good philosophy.
Yeah.
The benefits of forgiveness are actually backed by scientific research.
I'm ready to dive into that research.
Okay.
What have scientists discovered about the impact of forgiveness on our well-being?
Oh, there's tons of research. Studies have shown that forgiveness is linked to like a whole host of positive outcomes,
Uh-huh.
from reduced stress and anxiety to improved cardiovascular health. There's even research suggesting that people who practice forgiveness tend to have better sleep quality.
Mm.
It's really fascinating how powerful this shift in mindset can be.
So it's not just about like letting go of anger for the other person's sake, but for our own well-being.
Exactly. It's an act of self-care,
Mm.
plain and simple. By releasing those negative emotions, we create space for peace and healing within ourselves.
These articles were originally published in President Online,
Right?
which is a Japanese publication.
Yeah.
And it got me thinking about, how much do you think like cultural norms influence
Oh, for sure.
the way we experience and express anger?
It's a great question and definitely something to consider. Cultural norms play a significant role in shaping our emotional landscape, including how we perceive and express anger. For instance, in Japan, there's a strong emphasis on social harmony and maintaining a sense of wa, which can sometimes lead to suppressing direct expressions of anger.
So if someone in Japan is feeling angry, they might be less likely to yell or confront someone directly.
Exactly. Instead, they might express their displeasure through more subtle means, like nonverbal cues or indirect communication.
Huh.
And this isn't limited to Japan, of course.
Right.
Many cultures have unspoken rules
Yeah.
about what's considered appropriate behavior
Right.
when it comes to anger.
But could that lead to more passive-aggressive behavior, the kind that we were talking about before?
It's certainly possible.
Yeah.
If direct expressions of anger are discouraged, people might find other ways to vent their frustrations.
Right.
And as we've discussed, passive aggression can create a lot of confusion and resentment in relationships.
It's like trying to read between the lines instead of having an open and honest conversation.
Yeah.
But how do we navigate these cultural differences in a way that promotes like healthy communication?
I think it starts with self-awareness, recognizing our own cultural biases and how they might influence our reactions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we also need to be open to learning about and respecting other cultures' ways of expressing emotions.
It's about approaching those differences with curiosity and empathy rather than a judgment.
Absolutely. And sometimes it might even be helpful to have a conversation about these differences,
Yeah.
to acknowledge that people from different backgrounds might have different ways of handling anger.
Yeah. Okay. So far we've talked about, passive aggression, but
Right.
what about those times when anger kind of explodes in a more
Right.
like overt way, like a volcano erupting?
Well, that's another important aspect of anger management.
Yeah.
Sometimes anger can feel really overwhelming,
Oh, yeah.
like this sudden surge of energy that's difficult to control.
Uh-huh.
And in those moments, it can be hard to think clearly or make rational decisions.
It's like our fight or flight response takes over, and
Yes,
we react instinctively rather than thoughtfully.
exactly. That's why it's so important to develop self-regulation strategies,
Mm,
techniques that can help us manage those intense emotions
yeah.
before they escalate.
It's like having a fire extinguisher on hand in case of an emotional blaze.
Yeah, I like that.
So what are some of those tools we can add to our emotional toolkit?
Well, one of the simplest yet most effective strategies is just to take a pause.
Okay.
You know, when you feel that anger rising,
Mm-hmm.
step away from the situation if possible. Give yourself some space to just kind of cool down.
It's like hitting the pause button on that emotional roller coaster.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even just a few minutes of breathing room can make a world of difference.
Oh, yeah.
It allows us to interrupt that reactive cycle and gain a clearer perspective.
Okay, but what if you can't physically remove yourself from the situation? What if you're like stuck in a meeting or a tense family dinner?
Well, in those cases, we can turn to like internal strategies.
Okay.
Deep breathing exercises can be incredibly helpful.
Right.
Focusing on the breath can really calm the nervous system and create a sense of inner peace.
And what about mindfulness?
Right.
I've heard that that can be really helpful for managing strong emotions.
Mindfulness is a powerful tool for becoming more aware of our thoughts and feelings without judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And by simply observing those feelings as they arise, we can create some distance between ourselves and the emotion, making it less likely to, control our actions.
It's like we're watching the storm from a safe distance rather than getting swept away by the waves.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And the more we practice these self-regulation techniques, the better we become at managing those intense emotions. It's like building emotional muscle.
And this reminds me of the anger diary we talked about before.
Yeah.
By tracking our anger patterns, we can identify those early warning signs
Absolutely.
and intervene before things escalate, right?
Exactly. The anger diary becomes this valuable tool for self-awareness and ultimately for self-mastery.
Hmm.
It's about taking ownership of our emotional experience and making conscious choices that support our well-being.
We often think of anger as this negative emotion, something to be avoided.
Right.
But I've also heard that anger, when managed effectively, can actually be a positive force in our lives.
You're absolutely right. Anger can be a powerful catalyst for change.
Oh, interesting.
It can signal to us that something is wrong,
Right.
that a boundary has been crossed, or that a value we hold dear is being threatened.
It's like an internal alarm system alerting us to potential problems.
Exactly.
Okay.
And when we listen to that alarm and address the underlying issue, we can create positive change, both of our own lives and in the world around us.
It's about channeling that anger energy into constructive action
Yes.
rather than letting it control us.
Think about the many social movements that have been fueled by righteous anger,
Uh-huh.
movements that have led to greater equality, justice, and progress.
Wow.
It's about using anger as a force for good.
It's about recognizing that anger, like all emotions, has a message for us. It's about listening to that message, understanding its wisdom, and using it to create a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
It's remarkable how these conversations often come full circle.
Yeah,
We started by talking about forgiveness and the power of letting go,
right.
and now we're talking about how anger, when channeled wisely, can actually lead to positive change.
It's all interconnected, isn't it?
It is.
By learning to forgive, we free ourselves from the grip of negativity, and that freedom allows us to tap into the transformative power of our emotions, even anger.
It's like breaking those chains of anger and resentment
Right.
and stepping into a world of greater peace and possibility.
As we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Uh-huh.
what stands out to you the most?
I think the realization that anger is often a symptom of a deeper issue.
Okay.
Whether it's, a need for attention, a feeling of being unheard, or a perceived injustice, by addressing those underlying issues,
Yeah.
we can transform our relationship with anger and create a more harmonious life.
It's about going beyond the surface and exploring those root causes of our emotional experiences.
Absolutely. It really is.
We've talked about understanding the perspectives of others,
Right?
but what about having empathy for ourselves?
Oh, that's huge.
And we're the ones
Yes.
that are struggling with anger.
That's such a crucial piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Self-empathy is all about acknowledging and validating our own emotions, even the tough ones, like anger. It's about treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer a friend who's going through a hard time.
Yeah. That can be challenging, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Sometimes we're our own harshest critics.
Yes, we are. But remember, it's okay to feel angry.
Right.
Anger is a natural human emotion.
Yeah.
It's what we do with it that matters.
So how can we cultivate more self-empathy, especially when we're feeling angry in the moment?
Well, one simple but powerful practice is to notice and name the emotion.
Okay.
When you feel anger rising, say to yourself, I'm feeling angry right now. Acknowledge its presence without judgment.
It's almost like giving yourself permission to feel the emotion
Yes,
without getting swept away by it.
exactly. And then try to get curious about what's triggering that anger.
Okay.
What are the thoughts, beliefs, or experiences that are fueling those feelings?
It's like becoming your own emotional detective,
I love that.
right? Like putting on your deerstalker hat, your
Uh,
magnifying glass.
and just like any good detective, you need to be thorough in your investigation.
Yeah.
Ask yourself those tough questions
Uh-huh.
and be willing to face uncomfortable truths.
Because sometimes facing those truths is the key to finding a path toward healing and growth, right?
It's true. By acknowledging and addressing those deeper issues, we can transform our relationship with anger and create a more peaceful and fulfilling life.
You know, it's interesting as we've been talking, I'm realizing that managing anger is about so much more than just calming down in the moment.
Right.
It's about developing a whole new way of relating to ourselves
Yes.
and to the world around us.
That's a profound insight. It's about shifting our mindset from one of reactivity to one of responsiveness.
It's about becoming more mindful of our emotions, more intentional in our actions, and more compassionate in our interactions.
And that shift in perspective can have a ripple effect,
Wow.
not only on our own well-being, but also on our relationships and even on the world around us.
It's a beautiful vision, isn't it?
It is.
A world where people are more skilled at communicating their needs, resolving conflicts peacefully, and forgiving themselves and others.
It's a world where anger is no longer seen as a purely destructive force, but as a source of energy that can be harnessed for positive change.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into taming your inner Godzilla.
It does.
We've covered a lot of ground, from the subtle sabotage of passive-aggressive anger to the science-backed benefits of forgiveness and the power of self-regulation.
It's been a great conversation.
It has. So remember, you have the power to choose how you respond to anger.
You do.
You can choose to let it control you, or you can choose to use it as fuel for growth and transformation.
That's right.
It's about recognizing that anger, like all emotions, has a message for us.
Uh-huh.
It's about listening to that message, understanding its wisdom, and using it to create a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
It's about stepping into your own power, becoming the master of your emotions, not their slave.
We hope this deep dive has equipped you with the tools and insights you need to navigate the complexities of anger. Remember to practice self-compassion, be patient with yourself, and keep exploring the fascinating world of your own emotional landscape.